All right, now government has released its long-awaited new energy plan. The Integrated Resource Plan outlines the proposed sources of power in South Africa for years to come. It also tries to predict supply and demand from now until 2030. Traditionally, South Africa has relied on so-called dirty energy from coal, but the role of green energy like solar and wind have been expanded. According to the new plan, coal will still be the biggest source of energy at 59% of capacity. Wind will supply 18%, followed by hydropower at 8%. There's still a plan to keep nuclear energy in the mix at around 5%. To discuss, we're joined by energy expert Ted Blom. Thank you for being with us in studio, Ted. So there were a lot of complaints. Why do you think it took quite long to get this on the table? And now that it is on the table, do you think it's a good plan?
Okay, so it's taken 9 years to generate what should be an annual document. So from that point of view, I'm glad that eventually the thing has seen the light of day. The bottom line is that I think that in reality, we've moved past where this plan now is. I mean, it still talks about the commissioning of some of the power stations that are now already commissioned. So this document's a little bit dated. It also refers to the public participation, which I was part of in 2016. There's been no further public participation since then.
So nothing since 2016?
There's been no public participation since 2016. That happened in Birchwood Conference Centre in the East Rand, and I still remember vividly being at that participation.
Okay, so what's outdated and should have changed?
Okay, so I mean, they talk about the availability, the coming availability of Medupi, Kusile and Ngula. Those three are all basically nearly done and are ready to come online. So going forward, there won't be much impact from them. But what's really missing out of this, and I see they've ignored it, is the contribution or the potential contribution of household solar. Household solar, if we kick-start it tomorrow and give it a feasible tariff to kick in, we could generate 8 gigawatts of household solar within 6 months, and that will alleviate a lot of pressure off the grid.
So there have always been these calls to open up the grid, so we don't rely on sort of Eskom's efficiency or lack of efficiency. Independent producers can feed solar energy, whatever energy they'd like in, but you're saying it's not going far enough. We're nowhere where we should be.
This document is ideologically stuck in 20 years ago's thinking. I think we've passed that thinking. I think the time has come now. We've seen that Eskom is rotten, it's corrupt, it's unreliable. What needs to be done is the grid needs to be extracted from that and used as a national asset, and then the grid needs to be opened up so that we get rid of the rotten REAP tariffs of R4.80 a kilowatt hour, which are killing Eskom anyway. The market needs to be opened up, the cheapest people can supply, and if it's going to be renewable energy, the condition must be that it comes with storage, because it's that lack of storage which is causing havoc on the grid and is busy killing Eskom as well.
Well, explain the household issue, because I think for many South Africans that's a bit alien. But you could technically have a solar panel on your roof collecting electricity that you then sell to Eskom.
Or store for your peak evening use. There's roughly 8 million brick and mortar structures in South Africa, or houses. And each of them are capable of generating at least enough electricity for their own consumption, if not feeding into the grid if there's a surplus. But if they bring their own storage, at least then those households will get off the grid, and over time, under the current Eskom pricing regime, within 24 months they will actually have paid off their own investment.
So it's not too expensive now. That's always a complaint. Otherwise, why wouldn't have many more houses gone off the grid already?
Well, the only reason why it's expensive is because there are a lot of sharks in this market, and the technology is a little bit unfamiliar. So the brand names haven't actually come through yet as to what is reliable and value for money, and what is just cheap imports and a scam. But I've set up a network of people that can help people verify their quotes and maybe do an audit to see that the job has been done properly. Because those are the two biggest dangers with the household DIY system.
Okay, so the 5% nuclear is so controversial because we all remember the claims in the past that we were just getting this done to push through a deal with Russia. The Energy Minister, Gwede Mantashe, is saying this has got nothing to do with that. It is at a cost and a pace that South Africa can afford. We're looking at 5%. Is it justified?
Well, I'm technology agnostic. I mean, whatever works must actually be used. And in terms of nuclear, the new generation technology, the big grid, utility grade stuff, I'm not mad about because I think that we're getting to the stage where the grid within 10 years will be obsolete. Everybody will be generating their local power locally, but there is space for small-scale embedded nuclear, a small pebble bed. The stuff we killed off in the last 20 years, which was world-leading technology. I see the Russians and the Chinese have actually perfected that stuff now. They've caught up to where South Africa was, and in fact they've surpassed it. And you can put up a small-scale nuclear 100-megawatt plant within a year, and at a very, very reasonable cost.
And it looks like the plan is to extend the life of Koeberg first, and then introduce some small nuclear plants. So that's fair enough.
Koeberg is very old, and you know, you're sitting with legacy technology, which is still analog. I mean, Koeberg was built in the 70s before digitization came in. Koeberg's costs of maintenance will go up over the time, and I'm not mad about overextending artificially the life of an asset. If it comes, Koeberg has got a finite lifetime, as opposed to some of the coal assets, which, if they were maintained properly, would have an infinite lifetime. And if they were run properly, they would meet first world emission standards. The only reason why we don't like coal, and I hate pollution like everybody else, is because it's so poorly managed by Eskom.
So you're bringing up the argument that you can have clean coal energy.
Absolutely. I'll take you to power stations overseas, where I'll put you right next to a power station. And if you didn't turn around and see the nameplate, you wouldn't know you were within 10 meters of a power station.
So at 59% coal, many are complaining we're still addicted to coal as a nation. But do you believe we can move from that dirty to clean?
Absolutely. And I have no problem with carbon dioxide. When I was at school, plants actually needed carbon dioxide to grow. I have a problem with the other contaminants in the emissions. I mean, I'm seriously concerned about those. But I think it's time that people catch up to reality, and if they don't understand it, they need to go back to the school books.
Yeah. Well, what you're saying sounds fair enough, but we have Mpumalanga, Limpopo, areas that are just emitting dirty energy at a scale that we're being flagged globally for.
And that's all part and parcel of the regulatory downfall over the last 20 years under this government, is that we've seen flagrant transgressions of virtually regulations on every scope, in terms of town planning, in terms of hospitalization systems, police systems, justice systems, and also the emission systems, and water contamination. That isn't the... we need to address the cause, not the symptoms.
All right, thank you for your analysis tonight. So 59% coal, that's what the plan envisages, 5% nuclear, 18% hydro, so there are other power sources coming into the mix. Is it diversified enough? That links to our question of the day. Engage with us. That was energy expert Ted Blom.